Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Hey there. So I just recorded an episode. I'm recording this next one. I'm not sure how the audio is going to be. I got my little computer fan. It's hot up here. I'm on the third floor. And if I turn the AC on, you hear it. But if I don't, my little fan kicks on my computer. So I'm holding my microphone away from my computer with the hopes that this works. If you're hearing this, it worked and you're welcome. If not, it means I recorded another episode. So this is all by the by. But we are getting into our summer series where I'm going to be talking about disruptive, iconic artists who changed the name of the game, especially when it comes to business in arts, but very specifically music, mainly because that's where I've come from. But I did an episode on New Year's Eve called What Would Zappa Do? And it was really popular. So I thought for fun, for summer, the idea was that these be short, but I somehow managed to talk for 40-ish minutes for the last episode. So we'll see how this one goes, because this one, you know what I'm going to say. I am so excited about it. This is an artist and a creator and a producer I have been following for 30 years. I was introduced to this creator by one of the artists that I'd worked with in terms of just truly, it wasn't even genre defying. I mean, what this producer and beat maker and creative mastermind did was break time. And if you know, you know. So we are going to be asking ourselves, what would Dilla do? What would J Dilla do? If you know anything about this artist, they had a very strange, they had some autoimmune issues, but a blood disease. They passed very young. And for anyone even remotely close to my age, this person was probably behind almost every single track that you loved from the late 90s and 2000s hip. And J Dilla, nay James Avery, gosh, these are the types of things you would think I would like really pay attention to. But if you know me, you would also be very aware of the fact they are not the things that I give a shit about at all. I know him as J Dilla. His birth name, I'm pretty sure, was James Avery. I'm actually reading a really, really cool fucking book called Dilla Time. I highly recommend. The playlist that I'm going to share, I'm not like claiming it as my own. I am sharing that playlist because it goes through every single track that was mentioned in the book, but it will truly help you understand not just what Dilla created, but what inspired him and where sampling and beat making came from. Like when I started this book, I didn't realize I was going to get a full history on Detroit and just how influential Detroit was in the hip hop scene, despite the fact that nobody really knew that until Dilla was put on the map. And it's just a fascinating story in how connections and timing, not just in the way that Dilla bended it, but in how a creator can move through the world. And so much of their success is dependent on this one magic factor of time. I remember I've talked about this in other episodes, but when I first moved overseas, and really the way that I've kind of moved through the world up until the last few years is when I want to create something, I model it. My brain loves to know how things work. I will go so far as to get a job, even an entry-level position, because I think you see how things work in organizations very well from that level when you're the customer-facing, sort of forward-facing member of that workforce, but I digress. I love to know how things work. And so when I first moved to Australia and learned very early on that the way I was doing things was not going to be the way forward, I picked a handful of managers and music industry professionals that I thought firstly were working with really fucking cool artists that felt like they were doing something truly creative and not just for the sake of fame or fortune, right? Then I looked at where were these artists being positioned? What types of festivals? What types of gigs? What was their offering crafted as? Like how much time and energy was getting put into their staging and their performance and even like just every place these people were showing up. And then from there, I looked at like also how successful are they? And I found a handful of people that I found super, super duper inspiring. And I remember I referred to it as my self-induced professional development program. And I went to this music business conference to see the keynote speaker, who was one of these people that I was modeling my career off of. And his keynote was all about the 8 factors it takes to be successful as an artist. And I'm going to butcher these because I'm riffing in the real time and I hadn't prepared this in my notes or anything. But from memory, it was talent, performance, musicianship, which performance is like literally you performing on stage. Musicianship is your ability to craft, to be able to play your instrument. Then there was melody, which is your ability to craft a song. Then there was work ethic. How hard are you willing to work? There was team. So how well are you able to work with either your band or your team or both? Then there was something else, the 8th factor being time. I have a feeling that 7th one is going to pop up somewhere later in this episode. Anywho, the point being, time was the one thing you have no control over. You can literally develop each one of those other 7 factors, especially the 6 that I mentioned, right? You can practice, you can switch things up. You can try on things. If they don't work, you can take them off, try on something else. But timing, that's the one thing you can't control. And you can create the most amazing art. But if it's not trending, if the world ain't into it, if that ship has already sailed, it just may or may not land. And like learning about Dilla and his experience, he was one of those people that I don't want to say he had a hard childhood. He grew up in a part of Detroit that everybody would recognize now as not being the most advantageous in terms of development. But from what this book has gathered, his mother was incredibly supportive, she was really driven. She really wanted the best for her son. It becomes increasingly obvious that if anyone had looked at this boy through what is, an on-spectrum lens, he's wildly autistic. And that obviously impacted his ability to perform well at school or make friends. The author used a really brilliant line. He was incredibly shy, but not humble. And I think that was as to someone with a dash of the tism and 100% on spectrum. I thought that was a really interesting observation. And obviously all of this is done posthumously and through an incredible amount of research and interviews. The author is very careful to credit those people who were influential in Dilla's life, but also recognizing like this is one person's version of a very multifaceted story. The point being, there were certain intersections on the space-time continuum in Dilla's life that felt like absolute magical luck. And that's the timing that I'm talking about. There's a story where Q-Tip was played, this was back in the days of cassette tapes. And Q-Tip, who was an absolutely influential member of Dilla's comeuppance, was given hundreds of demo tapes every day. Why he played this one, we'll never know. But it was one of those pivotal moments in Dilla's life. And I haven't even gotten into the episode yet, which that I hope is demonstrative of how excited I am about this particular artist and creative and why I think he is such an interesting influence in terms of entrepreneurship and business strategy, let alone art and crafting and creating. So whereas Bowie taught us identity as strategy, Dilla is here to teach us that timing is sovereignty. And I think that's going to be one of the key components of 21st century business building is this concept of sovereignty. Dilla time, build systems that bend around you. Jay Dilla didn't just produce beats. He disrupted time itself. And I mentioned this at the beginning of the Bowie episode, and I will mention this at the beginning of every one of these episodes. I am not presenting this as an expert on this artist or their life and times, and most especially their art. I am bringing this discussion to us so that you can think about how the way that this person approached breaking all of the fucking rules, trailblazing, and visioning into what could be possible is applicable to how you are approaching your own life and your own business and your own creative process. So there are a million resources out there. And I encourage you to read the book. Or listen to the book. It's actually a better audiobook because firstly, it's about music and the author does some fun kind of nerdy shit when it comes to like trying to perform what's happening in terms of beats, because the way Dilla didn't have a time signature, which is like the way that they played with timing into music just didn't make any sense until it did, right? And that's one of the things that I think each one of these artists is going to bring to this table, and each one of these business icons is everyone told them this will never work until it fucking did. And then everybody started copying them. When everybody else was chasing sync, Dilla made the drums late on purpose. He broke the grid. Quantization? Nah. He let things breathe, swing, stutter, and groove until you could hear that the beat had no choice but to follow his rhythm. This episode is going to explore how Dilla's approach to time, the tools that he used, and the trust and faith he offered is a masterclass in entrepreneurial sovereignty. Break the rules of productivity, build systems around your natural rhythm, let imperfection drive emotional connection, and trust your feel more than the framework. I talked about this at the beginning of the Bowie episode, but the reason I'm in business is to do it my way. The reason you're here is to get what you need out of this, because you do know everything about how you operate, what you want to do, and how you're going to do it. Jay Dilla, like so many of these iconic creators and business people that we know and love and hate, was fucking crazy. You know, we can label it as autistic or on spectrum, and that gives, I think it kind of gives people permission to be a little like wackadoodle. But in going back through these interviews and some of his own personal history, like he was volatile. People would come to blows over his beats. He both joined and then broke up brotherhoods. He challenged everybody he worked with, and not always for the better. There were people that really put themselves on the line and gave him everything. And without being able to ask him what happened, they never really felt like they got the reward or even the recognition from Dilla, let alone from the monetary or business side of things. And this isn't even because he passed so young or because of who he was in terms of an artist or creator. He did what he needed to do to satisfy himself. And at times that came at the cost of other people's expectations and absolutely their benefit. And, it's so easy to justify these things once someone becomes successful. But perhaps this is hitting you because you're in a place in your own story and journey where you don't yet have that permission. You don't have that justification of quote unquote success to say like what you're doing is okay. And so as we get into this episode, what I hope you are able to take away is someone else's parallel play in terms of I always acknowledge when I'm repeating myself because I don't want you to think like I'm unaware of that, and I don't even know why. But it's always hard to justify the crazy until it isn't. It always feels insane and risky and selfish as fuck until you've got that external validation, and then people suddenly start to support you. And believe me, when you can believe in you and when you're doing things that are aligned with you, you will get to a place where you recognize like that support will come and go, that validation will come and go, and it cannot drive your art or your business. If you're looking to disrupt, if you're looking to truly create something unique, if you're looking to do something that hasn't been done before, and I trust that's you because that's what I've been talking about for 100 and almost 200 episodes, right? So, let's get back to Dilla, because he didn't just change music, he changed time. You were born to move at your own rhythm, to work offbeat, to sync with your own nervous system, and of course, to march to the beat of a different drum. What kills entrepreneurs more than burnout is obedience. Obedience to the systems, to the structure, to the grid. I'm going to use some like music terminology when we talk about grids, what we're really talking about in terms of like beat making and the synthesis of music. In quantization, there is a grid. If you think about like a 4/4 beat, you can see that like that almost dot on a line, if you will, every 4, every 16, you have a bar, so on and so forth. So if anything I say doesn't really like vibe with you, just feel free to look it up. Also, it's been a long time since I've been into music theory, so forgive me if I use like the wrong words, but quantization is just where you can use technology, you can use a computer to move a beat into a grid so it's perfectly timed, as opposed to like in different styles of music like jazz or reggae. Sometimes the beat will be purposefully slowed down so that it kind of grabs our attention, but also it feels groovy as opposed to like a metal. Like metal drumming is very different than like a reggae drummer, right? What makes it different if they're playing the same instruments? It's that timing. So Dilla used music, different music technology. It was all just coming out at that time. And there's always something really special about being on the fringe when new technology is being introduced. It kind of gives you access to a level of play, especially when it comes to sound design, that just didn't really exist before. And we're always kind of like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And especially when you might lack financial resources and access, it forces you to be really inventive and creative. So Dilla played with a lot of these different pieces of technology, and MPC being one of them. And due to his circumstance, he was forced to find this sloppy, really rebellious, very alive way of working with music. He made machines sound human. And again, he was kind of like he was taking apart his tape players so that he could re-record samples of music and start looping things before we had that technology. The way he created music became so iconic and recognizable. The entire community, the entire genre of hip hop started to mimic him. It became the Dilla feel. And it was this off time by design versus mistake. A lot of what happens in recording and these sort of like setups and signal chains and mic placements are from mistakes. You know, the mic slipped and suddenly it's at an angle instead of direct facing, and it captures a completely different sound from the guitar. And then suddenly that's how we record acoustic guitars. Or we didn't have enough mics, so we had to place the mic in a different place in the piano. And then we can hear like the breath of the pedals pumping, and it gives it this air and this feel to it. Dilla, again, because of his circumstance, was kind of forced to get incredibly creative. And in doing so, he completely disrupted the industry. Now I'm going to try and do what I do, which is apply this again to like, how can this impact the way that you work and the way that you build and the way that you create? So if we think about the grid, this prescribed way of creating music and a beat, if you think about the rhythm as like the skeleton, the structure of a song, one could argue that it's like hustle culture, like the Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, like there are certain ways of doing things. There's a linear path. There is a scale. There are rules. There's theory about how all of this happens. But Dilla built this timelessness. He was able to work outside of these structures by rejecting the illusion of perfect, of certainty, of the way things should be done. You don't need to be on time. You need to be in time. Dilla didn't chase virality or trends or labels. He obsessed over how it feels, and he obsessed. When the author of this book, or when people talk about Dilla's lifestyle and the way he lived his life, like, y'all, there was definitely some like OCD going on. And not just like, I like to be neat and tidy, but I have my routines and my rituals, and they cannot nor will they ever be fucked with, or I will absolutely lose my goddamn mind. Dilla obsessed over feeling because the quantizers said he was doing it wrong. The established beat makers, the gatekeepers of the music industry were like, this is fucked up when they heard his music. And also they couldn't stop listening. His body was his truth. He not only marched to the beat of a different drum, he had a completely different internal clock. And he couldn't stop. I talked a lot about this in the Bowie episode. Like, one of his most iconic albums, Donuts, he created while he was in hospital dying. He knew he was dying and he still made beats. He still broke the rules. He literally crafted legacy in his last moments. And this was someone who had already put their stamp on some of the most iconic artists and albums of all time, from A Tribe Called Quest to Erykah Badu to the Beastie Boys. Like, to literally name a speck of the number of artists that he worked with. And this wasn't about grinding and hustling harder. It was about devotion. It was about obsession. Like, having only ever seen a handful of people actually work like this, it almost feels dangerous, because they exist outside of this world. And even though you can see them, they don't see you. Even though you can feel that, like, it feels like insanity. Like, it feels unhinged. There's not a lot different than that person that's like walking down the street, like, you know, scratching invisible bugs off themselves, like yelling at the aliens. Like, they exist within that same space, but this person has managed to channel that crazy. And I guess that's where it's like, well, how does this apply to you? Are there elements in your life that feel like that? Are there things you just can't stop thinking about? Are there rules that feel like they are containing you and caging you? And how can you break out of them? Dilla teaches us you can go slow and still make classics. You can be sick and scared and break out. You can be in time. You can be on time. You can create time. So what would Dilla do in business? He would design systems around your energy, not the clock. And I talk a lot about this with my clients. Fuck 9-to-5 productivity. I mean, I was literally talking about this with my housemate who has this incredible fire that is wildly unpredictable. It does not show up at 9 o'clock in the morning when she clocks in. It often shows up at 9 o'clock at night. And when she has full permission to do her work when she wants, she will get 20 hours of work done in 3 hours. We just don't get to be in charge of when those 3 hours are, right? So he would build operations around his creative and peak states. Morning person, night owl, he calibrated everything to his own internal swing. And the author talks a lot about this. It was very ritualized, and some might say obsessive. He woke up at the exact same time every day, no matter what time he went to sleep, which was often not long before he woke up. He cleaned his house methodically. Everything had a place, and his house was his studio for the most part. He lived in obviously a variety of different places, but he always had, like, once he got to there, once he embraced the job title of producer, he had a production space at his home. So he would listen to music and clean his house for a few hours every day. Then he would go out, he would socialize whatever projects he wanted, you know, he was kind of working on, which was sometimes hundreds of projects between remixes and beat production and then producing. So he would go and kind of touch base. If he had to fly anywhere, he hated not sleeping in his own home. So he often just went for day trips. But then when he would get back from that sort of output and those connection points, he would come back and make his own music. And he would make music for as long as that muse was willing to inspire him. Go to sleep, repeat, same day, every day. That's what we mean by calibrate to your own internal swing. For some creatives, that level of discipline is prolific. For others, the concept of discipline is confining. You get to figure out your best timing, and then everything in your life can be manipulated around that. It takes a little bit of work. I know someone who's really great at helping with that, but you have full permission to create whatever structure you need to be able to perform at your best, even on your worst day. Let the groove guide the launch. Instead of over planning, Dilla would improvise. Feel the energy of the audience. Drop it like it's hot. Drop it when it's ready and adjust in real time. He wouldn't pre-sell. He wouldn't market. He didn't hype. He vibe checked. And what I will say is he bit off more than he can chew. He said yes to anything that felt aligned. And he's one of those creatives that really thrives under that pressure. Not everybody does that. So no, are you someone that like responds really well to deadlines? Which also means you're going to leave everything to the last minute. It's just how you're wired, my friend. Give yourself the space for that. Or are you a little bit more like me? Like, I cannot procrastinate. Even having these episodes hanging over my head, like, is a huge energy leak for me and drives me crazy. I need to chip away at things. And that also means I work every day. That's my choice. I love that. It works for me. I lean more into that like discipline side of things than the like complete free form. And what I will say is the people that actually we're talking about somebody who was incredibly disciplined. So I don't want to say that the really prolific artists I've had the opportunity of working with tend to be a hell of a lot more chaotic and like deadline oriented. They thrive in that chaos. It takes all types, right? But figure out how you work best, at least in this moment, and then build your life around that. Let the groove guide the launch, right? So we just talked about that. Timing is out of your control. So how do you know when something's ready? It's a trust fall. And I will say that comes with your own experience and wisdom, but it's done when it's done. Send it when it feels ready. And honor your own quality control while also balancing your perfectionism. And again, that's for you to interpret. Perhaps a system or a filter or some way of a checklist even might help you, because I do feel like, especially when we're getting started, it's never going to feel like it's ready or perfect or done. And there is a balance in getting your stuff out there and quality control. I'm going to leave it at that. Customize the tool set, kind of segued into that perfectly. Dilla wouldn't get stuck on the standard tech stack. He'd tweak it until it breathed. He'd keep tweaking, right? And he would bend it until it broke, and then he would scale it back. So whatever tools that you're working with, recognize, a hammer is for a nail, a drill is for a screw. You're going to use those different tools for different activities. What if they became like your paintbrush, or your microphone? Like they were just a channel, a conduit for what you're creating. What if you could manipulate it in a way that made it truly yours? The tool fits the creator, not the other way around. There's like, I've been using a ball pen hammer recently, which is different than whatever the name is of those hammers with like the nail things. Anywho, someone went, this regular hammer ain't cutting it for me. Or maybe it was the other way around. Anywho, we can tell I am not a handy person. And the sky just opened up. So I'm going to try and wrap this episode up because I do not know how much longer I'm going to have the internet connectivity. Okay. So lastly, make work that moves people. Forget metrics. Dilla would ask, does it make people feel something? That's product market resonance, not just fit. And first and foremost, does it move you, my friend? Okay, so here are your tactical tips to apply to your day-to-day, my friend. Delete the grid. Every platform, template, tool, and guru, I'm pointing at myself, tells you how to batch content, post at 9 a.m., launch with urgency, do your research, marketing plan, business plan, advisors, risk analyses. Delete the grid. Delete the rules. Delete the systems. Break the structures. What if your rhythm isn't what everybody else tells you to do? What if your genius drops at a very ill-timed hour You're a late night. You're a 2 a.m. creative. What would Dilla do? Design a work rhythm that supports your soul, that feeds you, that rewards you, and when you need it, right? So it's not just your calendar that's in charge. Notice when you're most inspired, literally, like write it down. Oh, I'm getting all of my ideas. I had one client who realized like from 1 to 5 p.m., they're on fire. Every other productivity system and time hacker and business person out there will tell you like the afternoon is slump time. It's when you should do like low cognitive demand tasks. And it's when you should like take a nap or go for a walk because you ate lunch and you're on a caffeine crash or whatever it is. Not this person. And when they gave themselves permission to build their life around the fact and honor their creative period in those times, it changed everything for them. A lot of other people I know, it's like at 10 p.m., they're on fire. If you're creating from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., you're not waking up at 8 a.m. at your best. You might have to. So that's when your low cognitive demand tasks, or better yet, a workout might actually serve you best. And maybe depending on your kid's schedule or depending on your work schedule, like there might be some rocks, some obstacles in your day-to-day life that deserve acknowledgement because they ain't going nowhere. And so you can build a success calendar. Did I just use that word? You can build your success around that. Do you? Boom. Imperfect hits harder. It is the unexpected. It is the thing that people are going to be like, wait, what? The fuck was that? And they're going to have something to say about it. That's good. Dilla's beats were wrong. Questlove talks about the first time he discovered Jay Dilla. He was leaving a nightclub in North Carolina, of all places, and he heard this nonsensical but hypnotic beat. And he told his cab driver to turn around so he could check it out. They felt right, but they sounded so wrong. Dilla let go of polish. He let his pitch feel like a handwritten personal note to the listener. He let his product, his music, come alive. And that imperfection gave it feeling. It gave it breath. Like it was the thing that resurrected Frankenstein, right? Your clients, your buyers, your audience, your customers, you don't want a perfect business. You want a real one. So honor that flow. Dilla had lupus. And in January 2002, after returning from a gig in Europe, he went to his parents' home feeling sick, like he had the flu. But it was discovered that he had this rare and life-threatening blood disease called TTP. It was really sad. It is really sad. Some of the brightest lights burn out, right? And none of this stopped him. He still made his magic. He didn't fight his limits. He created from within them. And then these limitations, these constraints actually became his genius. His poverty growing up, his lack of access to technology and tools and quote unquote healthy mentors. He worked with the people around him. And believe me, based on the research and the interviews and the book and all of this stuff, like these people loved him and supported him and protected him. It's just someone growing up in a much more, shall we say, like sitcom friendly experience would not have necessarily thought that Dilla was growing up in a safe and loving space, but he was able to come from a place that no one had ever succeeded within and become an iconic creative. If your energy is inconsistent, honor that. If you have good days and bad days, make your beats when you feel good and rest when you feel bad. Your rhythm is valid. Your pace is holy. Your work will still land. Dilla did have an insanely disciplined schedule because that supported him and his health. He mainlined beats and music while he cleaned his house and put everything back in its exact place. That's where he was able to then create from. He worked out, then he went to his studio, and he worked until he couldn't. Rinse, wash, repeat. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't fight to fit in. He rewired the machine over and over again. That's your call too. Don't build a business like everybody else's. And please resist the urge to build like a factory. You know, if you want to scale fast, there are efficiencies that are demanded within that. Where can you find the swing? Where can you find the soul? Build something that moves like Dilla, grooving, sideways, breathing, with space, full of feel. The world doesn't need more precision and efficiency. It needs more swing and more soul. Like I said, there's going to be a playlist with this episode. It is borrowed from Dilla Time because it covers every single track ever. There's a handful of tracks I've added to that as well. But this was a prolific artist. If this is the first you're hearing of Jay Dilla, firstly, don't feel bad. He was credited in the early stages of his career under these like production collectives. And it really wasn't until his last few years of life that he put out some of his own albums and music. He was a producer first, so he was behind the scenes, which is why, unless you're like into hip hop, a producer and engineer, especially in like beat making, probably, I don't know if a lot of people have heard of him, especially since like I'm old now and he passed a while ago. So RIP. And thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. The next one's going to be even more fun. I don't know if I should say even more. These have been super fun so far. So thanks for listening.